Hello, this is the Beans to Brew group once again, and today we're going to be discussing case number 9. Within this case, we're going to be talking about the criteria of done, as well as going through 3 acceptance criteria based off of a predictive user story, which is what we'll start with, and then 2 descriptive user stories for Beans to Brew in our research. So for the predictive acceptance criteria, we're using the user story of, as a user, I want to predict what parts of the week and day are busiest so that I can be sure there are enough volunteers signed up during those times. The scenario here is the user wants to determine when Beans to Brew receives the most demand for their products and services in order to accurately predict their need for volunteers and how many they should schedule, as well as when they should schedule them on. The given of this acceptance criteria is the user creates the volunteer schedule based on the demand, shift times, and the amount of available volunteers. The when is the user sends out the schedule to all Beans to Brew volunteers and both faculty and student executives. And then the then is Beans to Brew wants to avoid shutdowns and slowdowns because enough volunteers are recruited and assigned to shifts, which is why we're looking to resolve this scenario.
So for our next acceptance criteria, we're looking more at a descriptive user story. So this one is, as a proponent of sustainable business practices, I need to determine the amount of waste being produced by Beans to Brew. So this user wants to help reduce the waste, but in order to do that, they need to first understand it. So looking at those trends of use for the different products. So the given is that Beans to Brew has leftover brewed coffee and pastries that must be disposed of throughout the week. And this happens, all 4 days that the shop is open. So Monday through Thursday, each of those days, there's going to be leftover coffee. So then by understanding when that leftover coffee is and the types of products that produce the most waste, the organization can better understand some of their problems, and then using these descriptives eventually make some decisions and other analyses in order to figure out how to fix them. So that's this acceptance criteria.
And our second and final descriptive acceptance criteria user story is, as a supply chain manager, I want to know how much of each pastry and type of coffee is consumed each week so that I'm able to properly meet the demand for our products. And the scenario in which this user story comes from is the user, which is the supply chain manager in this context, wants to determine how much food and beverages that Beans to Brew sells so that they do not order too much or too little. The given is that the user places orders based on demand for each individual item that is offered at Beans to Brew. And the when is that this is happening weekly. And so demand is important because of the frequent orders. We don't want to order too much or too little. And by properly ordering the right amount, which would come from properly estimating demand, Beans to Brew would reduce the amount of waste that is generated by ordering too much, and also avoid shortages, which could damage customer relations. And that would happen if they didn't order enough.
And in the interest of time and reducing redundancy, I will highlight the different criteria for the definition of done. And you can rewind this video to see exactly the specifics of each user story's specific criteria. But going down through the list, user stories address functional behavior, which tells you what the system should do, non-functional requirements, so describing how the system works. User stories are specific to a single user. Obviously, every one of these user stories has a different viewpoint and desired outcome. User stories adhere to INVEST. As a reminder, INVEST stands for independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, small, and testable. User stories are small enough to fit into a single sprint. A single sprint is a short, repeatable phase, typically 1 to 4 weeks. User stories have acceptance criteria as laid out previously. and user stories have conditions of satisfaction, which is the explicit description by the customer of all the requirements that must be satisfied. So in summary, it's, did we identify the elements of the problems presented and explain them adequately?
And we appreciate taking your time, taking a look at our acceptance criterias, and thank you for your time.